Hey everybody, Morgan here. It is almost Christmas. It's like December the 10th or something like that. I don't even know what day it is. Oh, it's just not. Yes, it is. So I wanted to do sort of a deep dive into this subject matter because I posted a video a little while ago that you guys have responded to in an overwhelming way, and that was all about what kind of legacy do you think your loved one would have wanted to leave after they've made their transition? Or do you think that they would have wanted to leave a legacy of sadness over the holidays, or would they have wanted you to get really excited and celebrate and enjoy your life and just celebrate who they were and remember the best of them? And it got a really, really huge response, and that's one of the things that has honestly kept me going through a lot of different situations where I've lost so many people in my life over the years. Of course, you guys know Stephanie Wirtz, my best friend, business partner, co-founder of Entityseeker. Of course, she passed away. My dad passed away not long before that. So I've run the gambit of it as well, and I got into some really, really interesting discussions, sort of on the next level of kind of what we talked about in the last video, which is how do you get joy out of grief? And I was talking to my Gramps about this, and I was talking to Callie about this, who's one of my investigators and best friend. And we sort of came to these different conclusions, but I did a deep dive on it for myself because I really wanted to examine what that meant for me. And I wanted to share with you guys a bit about what I understood and what I ended up coming away with. So I realized it kind of breaks down into three different parts because the idea of joy and grief, they're so far apart on the emotional spectrum. How do you get from one to the other? And a conversation a while back kind of spurred my attention about this. And it stemmed from Dr. Joseph Campbell, who had a concept that you could find happiness in insufficiency. And that was the first point, and I'll go into these as we go. The second point is to be the observer of your emotions, to be able to distance yourself a little bit. And then the third part is the idea of surrender. So let's start with number one. And number one is this idea that insufficiency is the catalyst for joy. Elie Wiesel said that fear is so much of a catalyst for change. And that's something that we really have to make a decision about, because we can't actually get to the emotion of happy or the emotion of joy in a situation like losing somebody really close to us without understanding that without the insufficiency, we can't actually experience the next level. But experiencing the next level, deciding that you're going to make it through that ocean, through and wade through that water to get to that place of joy, that's a choice. It's a choice and it's a decision. So that was the first thing that I began to realize, is that we have to understand that other side of the spectrum, that happiness, can't actually come and exist without that. So we have to be able to hold it, see it for what it is, own it for what it is, and see it as a catalyst to move forward. So that was the first thing, is that it's actually the inception of better, because honestly, you can't fall off the floor, right? So some people prove me wrong on occasion. So the second part that has really helped me a lot through various incidents that I've dealt with in regards to this is the idea that we are indeed the observer of our thoughts and emotions. We are not our thoughts and emotions. We are the silent space between our thoughts. We are the silent space between our sentences. We are the silent space when we're able to be still and quiet our mind. And when we're able to do that, what we can kind of begin to do is hold the emotion like water in front of us. And when we hold the emotion like water, we all know as a kid, you were playing in the bathtub, and you'd scoop the water up in your hands. And as soon as you do this, what happens, right? Everything falls apart, or the water squirts out of your hands. There's resistance and there's tension. And the one thing I've really learned to do is to be able to hold things like water as best as possible, because as soon as you grab onto them, they're gone. And what I've found with grief and emotion is it kind of works the same way, where you have to be able to hold it like water in front of you, observe it as what it is, and find that stillness that sits underneath the grief. And it's there. There are times when that undertow is going to pull you down and pull you under. And you got to be able to let that happen too. But once that settles out, everything passes eventually. And, it goes back to that phrase, of course, this too shall pass. And once that passes and you're able to sort of come back and again, hold that emotion like water, you're able to become the observer of the emotion rather than getting lost in it. So that was a huge thing for me. And the third part of this is really understanding the concept of surrender. And people think surrender looks like this. Surrender looks like this. And that's something that's really important. When we lose a loved one, oftentimes our emotions are homeless. We just don't have a place to put them. We're the one, people think that our loved ones, become spirits with unfinished business and all of this kind of thing. And that's just simply not true. The ones with the unfinished business are usually the people like us who are still physical, still left behind. And our loved ones are the ones that are kind of waiting for us to catch back up, because they're now in pure positive energy and they are kind of waiting for us to rebuild that relationship with them. And we can't do that from a place of grief. So surrender is such a massive part of this. It's letting the undertow take you when it takes you. Be able to sit in the grief and in the pain and let it wash through you, because it will wash through you. And when it does, you're going to start to come up a little bit. That undertow is going to bob you back to the surface. You're kind of like a cork, and it's going to bob you back to the surface. And the big thing is, going back to the first video that we did, is that's when we start to see that happiness in grief. And the problem is that people end up wanting to bash it down because they feel guilty. If I'm not feeling bad, then I don't miss that person. Then I'm insulting their memory. And this is when it goes back to what we talked about before, which is, what kind of legacy does your loved one really want to leave? Do they want one where every time you think of them, every time you celebrate a holiday, you're upset and sad? And the odds are probably not. So it's not a matter of expecting yourself to be happy in moments of grief. Grief is grief and it's important. But it's understanding that contrast. It's understanding that movement, and that it is the inception of the next thing. It's the inception of joy. It's the inception of that next level of love and connection to source, to the universe, to other people, to your animals, to whatever that is for you. And I have found personally that when you go with that wave, what comes out of it can be absolutely incredible. And grief does not only apply, guys, to people that have died. Grief can apply to a lot of things, and it can apply to betrayal. It can apply to somebody hurting you in some way, or a business falling apart. Or grief can apply to a bunch of different things. Maybe it's losing what you thought was your sense of self over something, and it's a re-identification. But grief really is a re-identification. It's a re-identification with your connection. And if we don't let it completely strip us bare, if we make the decision and choose healing and don't beat ourselves up when we're upset, we can start to move that forward. So I really hope that this has helped you guys. This is, as I say, a longer video than what we normally do. We usually do our 1 minute things or whatever, but I really wanted to do a deep dive into this because I think it's the start of a conversation, and it's the start of healing. We've had a lot of people come forward saying that they are totally missing their loved ones this Christmas. I understand. My heart is with you. I completely get it. There's nothing. It is very hard to have a hole at that table and an empty chair. But understand that with non-physical, that chair is never empty. And that connection that you're looking for is in the healing. That rehabilitation of the relationship is in the healing. It's in the allowing. It's in the surrender. It's in the grace. And oftentimes it's not all that long before you kind of get on the same frequency with that person who is now non-physical energy. And you get on that same frequency, and all of a sudden, one day, you find yourself having some cool interaction, and you know 100% where it's coming from, who it is, and you can feel it. You can feel it. It doesn't always come in the form of an apparition. It comes in the form of a feeling, often first. And you'll be there eventually. And there is great love here for all of you. And thank you to everybody who helped inspire this conversation. And I'm looking forward to continuing it, I think, over the next month and continuing to understand it. I'm still understanding it myself. So let's start the conversation. Let's talk. Let's get some healing started, and let's make this holiday season something that becomes really positive, and something that non-physical is going to be cheering about. So I'm going to take my plaid pants here and get some work done. So I will talk to you guys all soon, and have a good week, guys.